Sacramento Kings general manager Monte McNair finally addresses the media over a month after Mike Brown was fired. Of course, Monte also touches on the trade of De'Aaron Fox. And we meet Zach LaVine for the first time ahead of his debut tonight against Orlando. It's all right here for you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. I'm here in the press conference room, where just a little under an hour ago, we spoke with Zach LaVine, and a number of hours ago, we spoke with Sacramento Kings general manager Monte McNair. A lot of people were curious why they were doing two separate press conferences. It's because it was clear that Monte was going to be receiving a lot of questions about not just the De'Aaron Fox trade from last week and over the weekend, but of course from the Mike Brown firing back in December. This is the first time that McNair has stepped in front of the media since that has happened. It's something that should have happened a long time ago, so it made sense for the Kings to have McNair come out by himself to face the firing squad, so to say, and answer those questions before Zach LaVine joined him later on. If you're curious and just or interested in just the Zach LaVine press conference, I'm going to play that for you, or at least the best moments from that press conference, in the final segment of this podcast. But for now, we're going to start with Monte McNair's comments from this presser earlier today. And Mike Brown was the topic of conversation right out of the gate. I know some of you are probably exhausted by the conversation of Mike Brown, ready to move on. Really, as media members, we could not move on completely until Monte addressed it. I will say this. You will see over the course of these clips that I'm going to play for you from these press conferences that Monte does get agitated by having to answer these questions. I'm going to break down and share my opinions on some of the answers that Monte shared, but I do want to say this too, because as critical as I've been of the guy, and as much as this press conference should have happened over a month ago, I appreciate Monte for doing his job, for sitting in that seat behind me, putting a microphone in front of him, and not just addressing all the media in the room, but the thousands of Kings fans that were watching around Sacramento, and of course just the NBA fans and NBA media members outside of Sacramento that were paying attention to Monte's comments. It's not an easy thing to do. It's part of the job, so he doesn't deserve his flowers for actually doing it necessarily. But I will express my appreciation for Monte for doing it, for taking the questions, and for handling it as professionally as he could. That being said, I'm going to play for you the first chunk of what he had to say about the Mike Brown firing specifically, share my thoughts on some of the comments that he made. I'll play for you a clip of all the comments that Monte made about De'Aaron Fox, and then I'll play for you back-to-back really good questions from Jake Gayden and James Ham. And I thought these were the two worst answers of Monte's press conference. I'll get to those at the end. But for now, let's start with, here are a combination of the questions and Monte's comments and answers addressing the firing of Mike Brown back in December.
Monte, it's been 40 plus days since Mike Brown was fired, and this is the first time we're getting to talk to you. What went into the decision to not hold a press conference before today, and sort of even that playing into one of the reasons why De'Aaron Fox was uncomfortable moving forward, because he felt he was left out in front of to answer some of the media questions?
Yeah, so I'd say at the time, obviously we were struggling as a team. Mike's done some incredible things for this organization, and we all saw what he did the past 2+ years for us. So I have nothing bad to say about Mike. I don't want to come up here and do that. I respect everything he's done. At the same time, we're trying to turn our season around. We're a month out from the trade deadline, and we've got to figure out now with an interim coach how we're going to go turn this thing around. That was the primary focus. I knew I'd come up here and speak to you guys at some point, but that was, it was all hands on deck for that. And so far, we've gotten ourselves back into the mix. So, I think we obviously have some more work to do there. On De'Aaron, I think incredible player. At the same time, we've offered multiple extensions. That's been public. In addition to public and private conversations that happened before that decision on the coaching change. So, I think, I'll speak more on that. But, for us, it became clear that there was no pathway there for a long-term agreement. And so that's also why we're here today.
Monty, I would just like to, say this. I asked this question, because, yes, it's been way out since December 28th, since we spoke. Since the firing of Mike Brown. There were many of us who was in that gym, spoke to him. And then the next thing you know, he's going to the airport. He gets a message that he's separated, from this organization. As far as full respect, due respect, why did it take so long for you to come out and just say, hey, this is what we did and this is why we did it and we're moving on? Why did it take that long?
Yeah, I think as I just answered there, we were focused on the team at that point and turning the season around. And, that was, at that time, that was what we were focused on.
It wasn't in the best interest of the media, to get some type of feedback.
Yeah, understand, from where you're coming from.
Next question.
Monty, how was Fox consulted at all or talked to, or any of the players talked to at all about the decision to move on from Mike? And do you feel that had a impact on ultimately an agreement not being able to be made or a separation happening between the organization and De'Aaron?
No, De'Aaron had nothing to do with the decision on the coaching change. No player did. That was the decision that I made, that the organization, as we discussed, obviously came to, but no players, no.
Mike was the first winning coach here in quite a long time, and you guys understood have a five-game losing streak at the time of the firing. Can you just explain the timing of it, particularly after he was given an extension, and why it seemed like he had such a short leash?
Yeah, obviously we had, I think, high expectations coming into the season. For a variety of reasons. We did start off with some success, but heading into December started hitting a skid. And then I think ultimately, as we're trying to figure out ways to turn the season around, a lot of different things were discussed. But, ultimately the 5-game losing streak at home and the Detroit loss, the next day, as we talked through it, that was, we felt we had a season that could be better. And, that was the choice we made at that time. That was the thing that, that we could push to. And, so far I think we've had some success there, but, those were the main factors that were going in at the time. And, the higher expectations things are, the more we expect of ourselves.
How unfathomable, I guess, in your mind is it that, someone had mentioned the extension for Mike and then obviously wanting the extension for De'Aaron, and then, you're about 6-7 months from some of those conversations and both of those guys are gone. I mean, is that completely something that's uncharted territory for you in terms of what you had felt going forward at those times?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, coming off the last 2 seasons and the decision to extend Mike, we did not envision that this is how the season would go, but all we can do is, continue to deal with the information we're getting and make the best decision in each moment. Obviously in hindsight, we maybe would have done some things differently, but we don't have the benefit of hindsight at the time.
In regards to Mike, was it simply just wanting a new voice, or were there specific things you can share that he wasn't doing that maybe you guys were looking for him to do? Like, what's maybe a little more insight into like the reason that you guys weren't happy with him anymore?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it was just the results, of the season, and specifically the way that we played in that homestand. We felt we needed to do something that was one of the options that we had been discussing in the days leading up, and like I said, the way ultimately that the last couple games of that homestand went solidified that.
Monty, can you say definitively whose call it was to fire Mike?
Yeah, mine.
So a number of things that I want to touch on from these comments from Monte McNair. One of the first things I wrote down is that he said, quote, "I knew I'd speak to you guys at some point." And he said all hands were on deck to turn this season around. So it's a bad excuse for why he did not address the media sooner. This should have already been in the past. Mike Brown should not be a topic of conversation over a month later when you're talking about the trade deadline, especially just days after trading your franchise player in De'Aaron Fox. But this was the bed that Monty and this Kings front office made for themselves by not addressing these comments. I thought in answer to Tony's question that he did not address the manner of which, the disrespectful manner of which he and his front office fired Mike Brown. I thought that was disappointing for him, at least to not own that the circumstances were not ideal. Having the media speak with him, having him run a full practice, and then firing him over the phone on his way to the team plane to fly to Los Angeles. Monty did not take the opportunity to wear that, and whether he had to apologize for it or not, I think that was a missed opportunity for Monty to really take ownership of how that played out and the negative perception or the shadow that cast on the entire organization with how that played out. He answered my question about De'Aaron Fox not being consulted, nor was any player consulted or talked about when firing Mike Brown, but he did not weigh in on how he thought that impacted Fox's decision. Was that the main reason why Fox did not re-sign or is now gone and no longer a Sacramento King? No, I don't think so. I think that played a big part of it, especially with Fox having to answer to the media and answer questions when his general manager wasn't willing to do so. I'm sure that played a big part of it, but that was not the reason why Fox ultimately left. But Monty did not address that. One of the things he did say is that firing Mike Brown was, quote, that was the thing we could push to at the time, essentially admitting the fact that and confirming that it was the easy choice, right? Firing Mike Brown at the time, that's just the easiest choice that we can make in that spot, which is what I've been telling you here on the Locked On Kings podcast. And it's no surprise that it's easier to fire a head coach than it is to make a trade or to address your front office issues, especially middle of the season when the Sacramento Kings were on coming off of a horrible loss to the Detroit Pistons on a 0-5 during a 5-game homestand, right? It was the easy move to fire Mike Brown. Doesn't necessarily mean it was the right move, although based off of how Doug Christie started and how Doug Christie has done as the interim head coach, maybe you could argue it was the right move. Regardless, this is where we're at. And the Kings had to make a change or felt like they had to do something because of how bad it was going, and they just had Mike Brown be the guy to take the fall for it. So it's not surprising, but to hear Monty essentially sum it up in his own words, I thought was interesting. Some of the comments when talking about Mike Brown that I thought was interesting is he was asked, I think Sean Cunningham from Fox 40 asked him about the extension this past summer and extending Mike Brown. Why would you extend Mike Brown if you were only going to fire him months later? And Monty's response to it was he basically said, in hindsight, maybe we could have done some things different. And my interpretation of that, and I've gone back and watched it a couple of times, my interpretation of that is him saying, like, in hindsight, we would not have extended Mike Brown, which I don't think that's the right choice, to say the absolute least. I think that he would have been ridiculed and torn to shreds, and the Kings would have been ridiculed and torn to shreds had they not extended Mike this offseason. So I don't blame Monty necessarily for extending Mike Brown. He felt like he had to because he pretty much did have to this past summer. I do, of course, blame Monte McNair in this front office for firing Mike Brown. You know how I feel in this situation. I don't think they should have done that, but regardless, this is where we're at. But to me, the hindsight would be, yeah, maybe we should have made moves earlier to address these holes in our roster, to address the lack of size, the lack of length, the lack of athleticism. Hey, maybe those are the things that you should look back on negatively in hindsight rather than signing Mike Brown to the extension that he had earned and he had deserved this past summer. Ultimately, the way that clip ended, a clearly agitated Monte McNair answering Chris Biederman's question about it was his decision. He owns it. He's clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. And that's going to be not Monty's legacy. I think Monty's legacy now will more be he was the guy to trade De'Aaron Fox out of Sacramento, or at least it is at this point. But ultimately, the handling of this entire Mike Brown situation and how everything is played out is going to be a black spot, I think, on his record. And now that he has addressed it, now that we've asked him questions about it, even if some fans might not be 100% satisfied with his answers and his comments, we can move on from it, right? So I'm not saying Mike Brown will not be brought up and talked about on this Locked On Kings podcast again, but we've gotten the closure from the organization. It was finally addressed. Then we could move on to other things, just like we're going to do on this podcast. In just a little bit, we're going to move on to Monty's comments on the entire De'Aaron Fox saga and Monty's 2 answers to specific questions where I thought they just were not good answers, and he does not come out of those questions looking very good. That's all still to come here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions of awarded winnings, Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's the way it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. It's as free as it gets. Pair that with 1 or more correct pick, and you're cashing out. This week, whether you're trying to make some money off of Zach LaVine's debut tonight, I haven't taken a look at it yet, but I think taking Zach LaVine's points is probably a good thing to do. Malik Monk's assists is always a good one to look at, taking the more on his assists. And then when it comes to Domantas Sabonis and rebounds, I'll tell you, more hits a drastic majority of the time. Check out their promos tab to tail any of and follow any of the great promotions and deals that they have going on that ultimately help you make more money and have more fun. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NBA for $50 instantly after that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, now let's hear from Monte McNair talking about trading De'Aaron Fox.
On De'Aaron, I think incredible player. At the same time, we've offered multiple extensions. That's been public. And, in addition to public and private conversations that happened before that decision on the coaching change. So, I think, I'll speak more on that. But, for us, it became clear that there was no pathway there for a long-term agreement. And so that's also why we're here today.
Hi, Monty. On the De'Aaron front, you guys obviously make a choice to do it now versus the summer. I just wonder from the group standpoint, when did that start to become more real, and what was your calculus on, that idea that do we ride this out and see how the rest of the year goes? Market-wise, what kind of intel and information and insight can you share about, doing it now versus doing it later?
Yeah. I mean, really, I think anytime, a player of that caliber, you get closer to the end of the contract, we've offered extensions, as we talked about. Anytime there's a transaction window, we revisit, how do we handle this? And I think at this point with, a year and a half left, we decided, with the public and private indications we were getting, that this was the time to at least explore the market. At the same time, I think we got, a return we're excited about, and so that's why we pulled the trigger.
Monty, you guys have been playing some good basketball before the road trip, and then this De'Aaron Fox stuff happens then. Were there more conversations with Rich Paul in the lead up to the road trip that made you feel like, okay, we have to pounce now and make this deal? Why was the timing now?
Yeah, I don't want to get into maybe those private conversations. I will say that conversations have been had, throughout and even more so before, dating back to the summer and the early part of the season. Obviously, the deadline is just the time that these things end up happening. And so, as I said with Sam's question, it's just each transaction window we kind of have to decide, like, what are we trying to do? And for the first time, we did decide to explore the market there.
I guess along those lines, De'Aaron has said multiple times that he wanted to retire here. He goes into the season not signing the extension, and then there's reports that you and Wes met with Rich Paul, and then the report a few weeks ago that you guys were open to trading him. Just from your point of view, where do you feel like things kind of went wrong or just ended the way it did?
I think obviously, the season hasn't gone as we all hoped. That's part of it. At the same time, I think, we did explore ways to have De'Aaron stay here, and it was made clear that wasn't going to happen. So we moved on.
Monte, can you, within reason of what you can share with negotiations, how difficult was it with San Antonio specifically trying to work out the deal, knowing that was Fox's ideal location of where he wanted to end up, trying to get as much return as you possibly could for a player who's obviously been the face of the franchise for so long?
Yeah, I would say, certainly anytime a player of that caliber, is in the market and also the way that it was very public. It made for a unique market, but I also think, our group did a great job of cultivating a market to ultimately get what we wanted in return. We were not going to settle for less than we wanted. And so when we got that, we made the deal.
So a number of things that I wrote down when listening to this press conference and listening to these comments from Monte, very clearly he puts a lot of it on Fox, right? And I'm not saying he's not taking ownership for his part that he played in the entire thing, although it does come off as that for some period of time. But you can, listening to those comments, it's very clear that Monte was kind of drawing a line in the sand and going, look, Fox didn't want to be here, or Fox was not willing to play ball. One of the things he talks about the different extensions that they offered De'Aaron Fox. Well, I thought that was an absurd comment because Monte is a smart man, and he understands that if De'Aaron were to have signed either of those extensions that he was offered earlier on, whether it was last offseason or a period before that, it's him willingly walking away from multiples, like a ton of money, millions upon millions of dollars that he would have willingly walked away from to sign an extension early when he could have taken the opportunity like he did this season to potentially make all NBA and earn a supermax contract extension. So Monte knows this. Everybody knows this. So the idea that we offered him multiple contract extensions and he turned them down, that we did our job or we did our due diligence, I don't think is a good look or fair or accurate by any means. Monte also said in there, for us, it became clear that there was no path to any agreement, which I think supports the belief of a lot of people that other than all NBA, De'Aaron Fox was not going to return here to Sacramento, or it was going to be an uphill battle for him to return. Monte also said we explored ways to have De'Aaron Fox stay. I don't know how much that is to be believed, although I do understand and recognize and appreciate that the position Monte and this front office were in, having to deal with negotiations, not just with an agent, but to deal with negotiations with Rich Paul from Clutch Sports and the leverage that Rich Paul does and the way he plays this game, right? He's very, very good at taking leverage away from organizations and giving them towards his clients. And that's a lot of what happened here in Sacramento. I do believe that the Kings did try to make it work, of course. I also believe that exploring ways to make De'Aaron Fox stay, well, they probably shouldn't have explored firing his favorite coach that he wanted here, and also going 2+ years without addressing a clear need of something that De'Aaron Fox has been asking for, which is depth at the wing and size and length and athleticism. That's been a big issue for this organization for all 3 years that they've had success as the Beam team, right? So I'm sure they did explore ways to make things work with Fox. They also, and Monte did not, own the ways that they made things worse for themselves and helped, in my opinion, walk De'Aaron Fox to the door or carry his bags out to the front porch for him. Monty also said that he was talking about like how public negotiations made for a weird market. Again, this is a Rich Paul play. Rich Paul knows what he's doing to try and take as much leverage away from the Sacramento Kings. Again, the Kings have to take ownership for allowing things to get to that point ultimately. And the main issue of what Monty said when talking about De'Aaron Fox that I had a problem with is he said, we're not going to settle for less than what we wanted in a De'Aaron Fox trade. Well, that's just a lie because you did. You did settle for less than what you wanted. You didn't even get your pick swap back from the San Antonio Spurs in 2031. You did not get any major piece of value from the San Antonio Spurs. I understand you got Zach LaVine, and getting Zach LaVine, they've wanted Zach LaVine for a while. At least certain people in that front office have wanted Zach LaVine for a while. So you got what you wanted in that sense, but you didn't get anything that you wanted really from the San Antonio Spurs. So I'm pretty sure when Monty made that comment in real time in this room, I probably visibly rolled my eyes at that response from Monty. I thought was silly, but that wasn't his worst comment of the press conference. He had a couple of answers to a couple of questions. The first from Jake Gayden talking about addressing the issue of size and length and athleticism on this roster. His response to that I thought was really bad. And then James Ham asks an excellent question about Monty looking at the last couple of years since he won Executive of the Year, and if he's done, like how he would assess his job and if he's done enough to make the most out of the opportunity for De'Aaron and for this organization. I didn't like Monty's answer to this either. Take a listen.
Monty, during Media Day, I specifically asked you about roster balance, specifically with length. You pointed to McDaniels and Len as two players that provided length. McDaniels, of course, didn't make it at training camp. Len has had multiple DNPs, isn't getting significant minutes, as you would say. Do you still have a plan to address the length issues that you guys have within this roster imbalance?
Yeah, certainly. Something we're looking to do. Well, we obviously, with the trade deadlines coming up, that's one option, and we'll continue to look at it going forward.
Monty, 2 years ago, you won Executive of the Year. Do you think from that moment to where we are today that you've done everything in your power to provide the support for whether it be Mike Brown or De'Aaron Fox on the court with players to make this thing work? And going forward, Zach LaVine is going to face the same issue that De'Aaron did of the length and athleticism at the wings. Is there a way to address some of those issues now?
Yeah, I would say two things, James. One is, from where we started to where we are, I think we've had a lot of success. We're in our third straight winning season, after whatever it was, 15, 16 without. At the same time, we haven't won enough for our expectations as they've gone up following, our playoff year. And ultimately that all falls on me. And so, I'm tasked with getting us to the playoffs, and that's what I keep trying to do. Up to you guys, how good that's been.
So yeah, a lot there that I just I've seen a lot of Kings fans reacting negatively to. I completely understand. Talking about his answer to Jake Gayden's question, it's something that we're looking to do. Like, it's so obvious. It's obviously we're trying to address this issue of size, length, and athleticism. Well, then why haven't you, Monty? Because it's been over 2 years that this has been a problem, but you still haven't addressed it to this point. So you can't get annoyed at a question from a media member about it because you haven't been able to do it to this point. So it's going to continue to be addressed or asked. It's going to continue to be pointed out. And you have a couple of days until the trade deadline, or a little bit less than that now, to try and address it then. If you don't, you're probably in big trouble for the remainder of the season, and this issue will continue. So I thought there was a perfectly fair question from Jake and not an adequate response from Monty. Ultimately, you've been dragging your feet on fixing it. And if you don't fix it, even with the excitement of Zach LaVine here, this team is still going to have some pretty big issues. And then in answer to James Ham's question, I wrote down a couple things that I did not like that Monty said. Monty said, in your third straight win, or said we're in our third straight winning season, as if that should be good enough. Now he goes on to say, we haven't met our expectations beyond that. But first off, you're barely winning right now. You're a game above 500, so it's nothing to be too excited about. Ultimately, you have not improved at all since, the best winning season that you had was the first one. You have not improved at all since that time. In fact, you're going in the wrong direction. So presenting it as we're in our third straight winning season after 16 or 17 years of crap. Look, fans are aware of how difficult that's been, and they've been the ones to actually go through it. Not you, Monty. You weren't here through any of it. They were. So you don't have to remind them like they should be grateful that this team has been good and relevant for 3 years. I do acknowledge that Monty and his front office staff helped get this team back to relevancy and out of that playoff drought. Give him all the credit for that. But it's not good enough to say, oh, we've been good for 3 years, so you should just be happy. That was how I interpreted that answer. I did not like that answer. And then he ended with a very kind of snarky, it's up to you guys, it's up to the media about how good that's been. Well, if it's up to us, then I've made it perfectly clear. I think it's been terrible. I think he's done more than his fair share of fireable offenses. I think this front office, unless something really changes this through the remainder of this season and into the playoffs, I think this front office should be gone by the end of this season. So if Monty wants to leave it up to us to dictate how good it's been, Monty, it hasn't been good. It hasn't been good enough. In fact, it's been so bad in areas that I don't know if it's in the best interest of this organization to have you continue as a member of the front office and as the leader of this team. But we'll see how everything plays out. Those are my thoughts on Monte McNair's press conference. You can go and check out the full press conference at any time on abc10.com or on the ABC10 Plus app if you want to watch it start to finish, although most of the great stuff, all of the great stuff I've included here in this podcast here today. And in just a second, I'm going to play for you all of the best bits from Zach LaVine's press conference. I think you'll really enjoy meeting your newest king. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets on the Super Bowl, yeah, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Again, bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, now it's time to hear from the newest Sacramento King, Zach LaVine. This is where I leave you for this podcast. I will be back tonight after Zach LaVine's debut against the Orlando Magic. I'll have a full recap of that game in its podcast form coming out late this evening. So I hope you will tune in for that. I appreciate you tuning in for this. It's great that we finally got these press conferences out of the way. If you want to share your thoughts on these press conferences, feel free to do so. You can hit me up on Twitter or X at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. But for now, please enjoy the press conference of your newest Sacramento King, Zach LaVine.
My lovely wife actually just had the birth of our third kid, our daughter. And I have a bunch of family here, so my friends here right now. My wife actually going to try to make it to the game, so she is incredible. But yeah, no, we're really excited. I wanted to play as soon as possible. I remember talking to Monty and the guys. I was like, if I could try to make it to Minnesota, but stuff didn't clear that fast, so I'm here now.
And just for you, what was the initial reaction to being traded here to Sacramento?
I was really excited. I want to thank Chicago. I spent 8 years there. The organization grew my family there. Grew up as a man there as well. So there's no love lost or bad blood there. It's just you have to understand business, and I've got to know that over my tenure in the career of the NBA. But super excited. I'm back here on the West Coast. I'm 45 minutes from my house in Newport. So I know a couple guys on the team. Obviously, DeMar couldn't stay away from me for more than 3 months. So it's really fun. I'm just super excited, especially with these last after All-Star break, this push to try to get into the playoffs.
Hey Zach, Matt George, ABC 10. Congratulations to you and your family. You brought up DeMar. Speaking of which, having someone that you're so familiar with from your time together in Chicago, now joining a new franchise, how much easier does that make that transition, having somebody like that you are so familiar with that you guys can just pick up a ball and play together?
I think it helps a lot. Obviously, being familiar with people, and at the end of the day, it is just basketball. Coming here and us doing our job, but having guys that you played with or being familiar with always helps, and me and him have had a really good relationship. He's from Chicago even before that, so it's a seamless transition.
Hi, Zach. Tristy Rodriguez, NBC Sports California. Welcome to Sacramento. I don't know if you know, but your hat yesterday, the Raider hat, raised a lot of controversy. Are you a Raiders fan? What's
I'm
the
a
story?
big Raiders fan. I know there's some San Francisco Giants fans and some 49ers fans, but I've been a Raider fan since my dad played with the Seahawks back in the day. Family's from San Bernardino, California, so I've been riding with the Raiders through good and bad. So you guys might see some Raider hats around here from me.
And then just 2 basketball questions. First, I guess since everyone's being asked this, what was your reaction to the Luka trade, Luka being a Laker now?
I mean, everybody, I think when it went across our timeline, we just didn't really, I thought it was like fake news. But that was a big domino to fall that no one thought it would. But that's the NBA that we live in. And that's the business of basketball that I've learned to know. And, I think that just started a little bit of the floodgates going on to this trade deadline coming up on February 6th. So, it's going to be exciting to watch.
And just along those lines, obviously a little bit of a shakeup in the West. It's been a couple of years since you've been here.
Yeah.
But how just excited are you to compete in the West with the best of the best here?
Yeah, I mean, I started my career off here in the West. It's not that I'm not familiar with it. Obviously, you play all the teams in the East, but being out here is a little different. You have to be ready to compete and play each and every night. And I'm excited for it, especially at this stage of my career.
Hi, Zach. Michelle Dapper, KCRA. Congrats to your family and welcome to Sacramento. I'm curious, as an NBA veteran, what was your perception of this organization and then Sacramento Kings as a whole, especially the front office?
I mean, you guys should know I signed here about 6 years ago, so I've been a fan for a long time. I thought I was going to be a King, a little bit ago. Obviously, Chicago matched my offer sheet, but I've had a good relationship with a lot of guys that's played here. I understand the culture here, being from the West Coast and watching a lot of games and knowing how incredible the fans are each and every game, not just when you play Golden State or the Lakers, but Tuesday night it's still going to be packed in here and people pull for their team. So I'm really excited to go out here, especially the first game and start building the chemistry, not just with the fans but with the players as well.
Zach, there have been rumors of you coming here a couple of times before to play with De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
How do you think filling those shoes? How are you different? What do you bring that's different than De'Aaron, and what should fans expect from you?
I mean, me and De'Aaron are we're close. We're in the same agency as well. We got to talk on the phone and obviously understand a little bit about how the business works, and that's all fine. But I think fans should understand I play extremely hard. Obviously I can put the ball up and I can put the ball in the basket, but, the more I've gone into my career of trying to be more of a leader, experienced guys, and even with some older dudes on the team like Jay and DeMar, just help leading as well, just through expectations and experiences as well. So, I'm really excited and, to go out here and show everybody what I do, and continue to keep growing my game and hopefully grow the teams.
Hey, Zach. Brendan Nunes, Sacktown Sports. You and Doug both being Washington guys, just how far back does your history go, and how do you feel about getting a chance to play for him here?
Doug is great. I remember growing up watching Doug. He's one of the first guys to make it out of Seattle. He's like a pioneer from that area, and growing up West Coast, watching him with Sacramento, obviously battling against the Lakers and stuff in the conference finals. The tenacious and the mentality that he brings. I know where he's from and what he's about. So we've had numerous conversations. And then even, when I was even playing here, when he was doing TV, radio, or assistant coach, I always come up, say what's up, give him a hug. So it's really cool having him be in that lead seat to help him out as well.
Hey, Zach. Deuce Mason, NBC Sports California. Last year, overcoming the adversity, you have the surgery, you're away from the game. How much did you benefit from just kind of reflecting and that time off? Like, what did you learn about yourself during that stretch?
I mean, whenever you miss a period of time from something you love and it's taken away from you, you have to appreciate it more. I think when I got hurt, obviously dealing with that in Chicago and we were going through those ups and downs, obviously there's trade rumors. You just take a step back and then you start reflecting on, like, what can I do better? How can I come back and improve not just myself but the team overall? And I think that's pretty much what it was. And then just getting back to joy of loving and playing again, because I played 25 games with a broken foot. It sucks, but you can't do anything about it. Injuries is part of sports. So when you get that time back, how are you doing? How are you doing? Manage it.
Zach, how excited are you to light the beam?
Yeah, everybody's talking about lighting the beam, man. So hopefully we get this thing done sooner than later. Hopefully try to light the thing up tonight.
coming into this situation, the Kings are a team that wants to be a win-now team, and they're kind of even. It's like a fresh start for them right now with you being on the team. Yeah. Do you feel any pressure to come in and make an immediate impact in a positive way?
I don't think it's pressure, but I think that's what is expected of you. Somebody in my position, you come here and you try to, improve the team. That's what I think what these guys brought me here for, and for me personally, I've been to one playoff series. I've spent 8 years in Chicago. I've won a lot of individual accolades, but as a team setting, I'm looking forward to going out here and trying to help these guys and them helping me as well get to that next step. So I'm more than excited for the challenge. I don't think it's more pressure.
Hey, Zach, Tyler Texair here with iHeartRadio. How excited are you to play next to such a great all-around player like Domantas Sabonis?
Domantas has been incredible since I've been in the NBA. Probably one of the best floor connectors you could have, and low-key probably the strongest guy in the NBA that we never like to box out, so I'm glad he's on our team. And I'm really excited with different cuts and plays that you can run with him. We'll get our chemistry down soon. On the nickname, I don't know, man. I'll let you guys figure that out.
Zach, you just mentioned it too about playing, Lightning Beam, which we hope you do that, here soon. But what's your message to the fans here? Because you know how energetic and loud it gets here, and this whole town is just so passionate about this franchise.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a passionate player about basketball. I put a lot of hard work into my game, and I don't take this for granted. So every time I step on the floor, I'm not taking for granted the time that they come to watch the game, spending their hard-earned money to come here and watch and cheer on the team. So, I'm gonna be right there with them and do everything I can for the city.
Zach, kind of building off that over your career, you've had a lot of success in this building. On the opposite side, now calling this building home, one, how excited are you to play and call this building home? And two, what is it about this gym that so many shooters seem to just enjoy?
I mean, I've always just loved playing, close to back home. I have friends and family that are close by, so they always came to the game. And, now calling it home, it's going to be really fun for me to have, games like that every day where I get to see my wife, my kids, mom, dad, friends. And I don't know, man, it's a shooter's gym. So, hopefully it stays like that for me. I've always liked shooting here.